Marcus Thompson sat alone at his corner table in the upscale restaurant, watching his 8-year-old son David struggle with his wheelchair near the entrance. The expensive mahogany dining room buzzed with quiet conversations and the gentle clink of silverware, but Marcus felt completely isolated. His business empire worth $3 billion meant nothing when he saw other children staring at David's leg braces and the way he moved differently. David had been born with spina bifida, and despite Marcus's wealth and access to the world's best doctors, his son would always face challenges that money couldn't fix. Marcus had tried everything: the most expensive treatments, private specialists, experimental therapies in Switzerland. Nothing changed the fact that David needed help with simple things like walking and climbing stairs. The relationship between father and son had grown distant over the years. Marcus worked 18-hour days, traveling constantly for board meetings and acquisitions. He told himself he was building an empire for David's future. But the truth was harder to face. Being around his disabled son made Marcus feel helpless, and he hated feeling helpless. David's mother, Sarah, had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. Since then, Marcus had hired a rotation of nannies and caregivers, but none of them seemed to understand David the way Sarah had. The boy had become quieter, more withdrawn. He spent most of his time reading or playing alone in his room at their mansion. Tonight was supposed to be special. Marcus had promised David they would have dinner together, just the two of them. It was David's birthday, and Marcus had cleared his schedule for the first time in months. But even now, sitting in this fancy restaurant, Marcus found himself checking his phone for urgent emails and stock prices. David finally made his way to the table with his walker, breathing heavily from the effort. The other diners tried not to stare, but Marcus noticed their sideways glances and whispered comments. His jaw tightened with familiar anger and embarrassment. "Sorry I took so long, Dad," David said quietly, settling into his chair. His voice was small and apologetic, which made Marcus feel even worse. "It's fine," Marcus replied curtly, not looking up from his phone. "Order whatever you want. Money's no object." The words came out harsher than he intended, but Marcus didn't know how to talk to his son anymore. Every conversation felt awkward and forced. He could negotiate billion-dollar deals and command boardrooms full of powerful executives, but he couldn't connect with his own child. A young black waitress approached their table with a warm smile. Her name tag read, Keisha. She was probably in her early 20s, with kind eyes and a gentle manner. Unlike the other restaurant staff who seemed nervous around Marcus because of his reputation, Keisha appeared completely at ease. "Good evening," she said cheerfully. "I'm Keisha, and I'll be taking care of you both tonight. What can I get you started with?" Marcus barely looked up from his phone. "Whatever the kid wants, and I'll take the salmon. Make it quick. I have calls to make." Keisha turned her full attention to David instead of being offended by Marcus's rudeness. "And what would you like tonight? It's your special dinner, isn't it?" David's eyes lit up with surprise that someone was actually talking directly to him rather than around him. "How did you know it was special?" "I could just tell," Keisha winked. "You look like someone celebrating something important. Am I right?" "It's my birthday," David admitted shyly. "I'm 8 today." 8 years old. That's a very important age, Keisha said seriously, crouching down to David's eye level. "Do you know what we do for 8-year-old birthday boys here?" David shook his head, his smile growing wider than Marcus had seen in months. "Well, first we make sure you get extra whipped cream on whatever dessert you choose. And second, if you're brave enough, we let birthday boys pick a song for everyone in the restaurant to hear. Would you like that?" David looked nervously at his father, who was still absorbed in his phone and emails. Marcus was reading about a potential merger that could add another $500 million to his portfolio. "I don't know," David whispered. "My dad doesn't like it when I make noise or bother other people." Keisha glanced at Marcus with a slight frown, then returned her attention to David. Well, how about we start with dinner, and then we'll see about that song later. What sounds good to you? As David studied the menu with Keisha's patient help, Marcus found himself occasionally glancing up from his phone. There was something about this waitress that was different from the usual staff at high-end restaurants. She wasn't trying to impress him or hover around hoping for a large tip. Instead, she was focused entirely on making David feel comfortable and special. I think I want the chicken fingers, David decided, but I'm not sure if I can cut them by myself. That's no problem at all, Keisha assured him. I can help you with that, or we can ask the kitchen to cut them into perfect bite-sized pieces. Whatever makes you happy. Marcus felt a strange twinge in his chest watching this interaction. When was the last time he had offered to help David with something so simple? When was the last time he had asked what would make his son happy? The restaurant continued to fill with the evening crowd, wealthy businessmen, socialite wives, young couples on expensive dates. Marcus recognized several faces from charity galas and board meetings. This was his world, full of people who judged everything by net worth and success. But sitting here watching Keisha interact with David, Marcus began to feel like he was seeing his son through someone else's eyes for the first time. David wasn't just the disabled child who reminded Marcus of his own limitations as a father. He was a smart, sensitive boy who lit up when someone paid attention to him. Dad, David said tentatively, Keisha asked what kind of music I like. Is it okay if I tell her? Marcus looked up from his phone properly for the first time that evening. David was looking at him hopefully, waiting for permission to share something about himself. How had things gotten to the point where his son needed permission to talk about music? Sure, Marcus said, putting his phone face down on the table. Tell her whatever you want. David beamed and turned back to Keisha. I really like classical music, especially piano pieces. My mom used to play piano before she died. Sometimes I listen to her old recordings. Keisha's expression softened with understanding. That sounds beautiful. Music is a wonderful way to remember people we love. Do you play piano too? I try, but it's hard because of my legs. I can't reach the pedals properly, and sitting for a long time makes my back hurt. Marcus felt his throat tighten. He had bought David a piano after Sarah's death, thinking it would help the boy feel closer to his mother. But he had never asked how the lessons were going or whether David needed any special accommodations. He had simply hired a teacher and assumed that was enough. You know what? Keisha said thoughtfully. There are lots of famous musicians who found creative ways to play, even when their bodies work differently. I bet there are some tricks that could help you too. Really? David asked eagerly. Absolutely. Music is for everyone, no matter what. The most important thing is that it makes you happy. As Keisha headed to the kitchen to place their order, Marcus sat in silence, processing what he had just witnessed. This young waitress, who probably made more in tips tonight than most people earned in a week, had shown more genuine interest in his son's life in 10 minutes than Marcus had shown in months. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He was failing as a father, and everyone could see it except him. Their dinner arrived quickly, and Keisha had indeed asked the kitchen to cut David's chicken into perfect pieces. She also brought him a special cup with a straw, making it easier for him to drink without struggling. These small gestures weren't lost on Marcus, who was beginning to see how little attention he had been paying to his son's daily challenges. This is really good, David said happily, managing to eat without needing help. Thank you for making it easy for me. You're very welcome, Keisha replied, refilling his water. You know, my little brother has some challenges, too. He was born with one arm shorter than the other. When he was your age, he used to get frustrated when things were hard for him, but you know what he learned? David leaned forward with interest. What? He learned that asking for help isn't giving up. It's being smart. The strongest people know when to ask for what they need. Marcus paused with his fork halfway to his mouth. How many times had David asked him for help with things, only to be dismissed or handed off to a nanny? How many times had Marcus made his son feel like his needs were inconveniences? "Where is your brother now?" David asked. "He's in college studying engineering," Keisha said proudly. "He designs special tools and equipment for people with disabilities. He says his goal is to make the world work better for everyone, not just some people." "That's so cool," David breathed. "I want to do something important like that too." "I believe you will," Keisha said sincerely. "You seem like someone with a big heart and a smart mind. That's a powerful combination." Marcus watched his son's face transform with pride and possibility. When was the last time someone had told David he could do something important? Marcus realized he had been so focused on protecting David from disappointment that he had never encouraged the boy to dream big. As the evening progressed, the restaurant filled with soft music from a piano in the corner. A professional musician played gentle background melodies while guests enjoyed their meals. David kept glancing over at the piano with longing in his eyes. "Do you wish you could play like that?" Keisha asked, noticing his interest. David nodded. "I love piano music, but I'm not very good. My teacher says I need to practice more, but it hurts to sit that long." "Well," Keisha said with a mysterious smile, "maybe tonight is a good night to try something new. Would you like to go listen closer? I bet if you asked nicely, the piano player might even let you try a few notes." David looked at his father uncertainly. Marcus had always been strict about not bothering other people or drawing attention to David's limitations. In Marcus's world, showing weakness was dangerous. But seeing the hope in his son's eyes, Marcus surprised himself by nodding. "If you want to, go ahead." Keisha helped David with his walker, and they made their way over to the piano. Marcus watched from his table as Keisha introduced David to the musician, a kind older man who immediately made room for the boy to sit beside him on the bench. David's fingers found the keys tentatively, and he began to play a simple melody that Marcus recognized as one of Sarah's favorite pieces. The notes were soft and hesitant at first, but as David grew more confident, his playing became clearer and more expressive. Something magical happened in that moment. The conversations in the restaurant gradually quieted as people began to listen to the music. Instead of staring at David's disability, they were hearing his talent. The boy who had walked in struggling with his walker was now creating something beautiful that touched everyone in the room. Marcus felt his eyes burn with unexpected tears. This was his son, not the burden he had been treating him as, but a remarkable child with gifts that had nothing to do with his physical limitations. When David finished playing, the entire restaurant burst into spontaneous applause. The boy's face glowed with joy and pride as people called out compliments and encouragement. For the first time in years, David was being celebrated instead of pitied. "That was incredible," the professional pianist told David. "You have real talent, young man. Have you ever thought about performing?" David looked across the room at his father, who was wiping his eyes and smiling for the first time that evening. "I don't know," David said honestly. "My dad worries about me doing things that might be too hard." The pianist followed David's gaze to Marcus. "Well, I think your dad just saw that some things are worth the challenge." Keisha helped David back to their table, where Marcus was waiting with a completely different expression than before. The businessman who had arrived, distracted and impatient, now looked at his son with wonder and regret. "David, that was—" Marcus started, then stopped. He had been about to say surprising, but that wasn't right. It wasn't surprising that his son had talent. It was shameful that Marcus had never bothered to really listen before. "That was beautiful," he said instead. "Your mother would have been so proud." David's smile lit up the whole table. "Do you really think so?" "I know so," Marcus said firmly. "You played her favorite song perfectly." As they shared dessert, chocolate cake with extra whipped cream, just as Keisha had promised, Marcus found himself really talking with his son for the first time in months. They discussed David's piano lessons, his favorite composers, and his dreams of maybe performing someday. "I know it might be hard because of my legs," David said thoughtfully. "But Keisha's right. Maybe there are ways to make it work." Marcus looked across the restaurant to where Keisha was serving other tables with the same warmth and attention she had shown them. This young woman, who couldn't have been much older than some of his junior employees, had just taught him more about parenting than all the expensive child psychologists he had consulted. "You know what?" Marcus said, making a decision that surprised even himself. "We're going to find those ways. Whatever you need to make music work for you, we'll figure it out together." David stared at his father in amazement. "Together? You mean you'll help me?" The question broke Marcus's heart. His son was shocked by the idea of his father helping him with something important. How had Marcus let things get this bad? "Yes, together," Marcus said firmly. "From now on, we're a team." As the evening wound down, Marcus realized he hadn't checked his phone once since David's performance. The emails and business calls that had seemed so urgent earlier now felt meaningless compared to the light in his son's eyes. But the most important moment was still to come, though Marcus didn't know it yet. As they prepared to leave, something would happen that would change both their lives forever. As Marcus asked for the check, he noticed David looking longingly at the small dance floor where a few couples were swaying to the soft piano music. The boy had always loved music, but Marcus had never seen him show interest in dancing before. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked gently. David hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I was just wondering what it would feel like to dance. I know I can't because of my legs, but sometimes I imagine what it would be like to move to music like that." Marcus felt another stab of guilt. He had never even considered that David might want to dance. In his mind, his son's limitations meant automatically ruling out certain activities. But watching David's wistful expression, Marcus realized he had been making assumptions instead of asking what David actually wanted. Keisha appeared at their table with the check, but she noticed David's expression too. "You look like someone with dancing on his mind," she said with a smile. "I was just watching," David said quickly. "I can't really dance because of my braces and walker." Keisha looked thoughtful. "You know, there are lots of different ways to dance. Dancing isn't just about your feet. It's about feeling the music in your whole body and expressing that feeling however you can." She glanced at Marcus, who was listening intently. "Would you mind if I showed David something?" Marcus nodded, curious about what she had in mind. Keisha helped David stand up from his chair, making sure his walker was nearby for support. "Can you feel the music?" she asked. David closed his eyes and listened to the gentle piano melody flowing through the restaurant. "Yes," he said softly. "Good. Now dancing can be as simple as moving your hands to match what you hear in your heart." Keisha began to move her arms gracefully, following the rhythm of the music. "Try it with me." David tentatively raised his arms and began to sway them gently. At first he was self-conscious, looking around to see if people were staring. But Keisha's encouraging smile helped him relax and focus on the music instead. "That's perfect," she said warmly. "See? You're dancing." Marcus watched in amazement as his son's movements became more confident and expressive. David might not be able to move his legs like other children, but his upper body moved with grace and feeling that was genuinely beautiful to watch. "Can you feel how the music makes you want to move differently?" Keisha asked. As the song shifted to a livelier tempo, she showed David how to change his movements to match. David laughed with delight as he discovered he could express different emotions through his gestures. When the music was sad, his movements were slow and gentle. When it became more upbeat, he moved with energy and joy. Other diners had begun to notice, but instead of the uncomfortable stares Marcus was used to, people were watching with genuine appreciation. They could see the pure happiness on David's face and the beauty of his movements. "This is amazing," David said breathlessly. "I never knew I could dance." "Of course you can dance," Keisha said matter-of-factly. "Everyone can dance in their own way. You just needed someone to show you how." Marcus stood up from his chair, moved by what he was witnessing. His son wasn't struggling or being limited by his disability. He was creating something beautiful despite it, or maybe because of it. David's unique way of moving had a grace and emotion that was entirely his own. "David," Marcus said quietly, would you like to dance with your old dad?" David's eyes went wide with surprise and joy. "You want to dance with me?" Marcus had never danced with his son before. He had barely hugged him in the past year. But standing there, watching David's face light up with possibility, Marcus knew this was one of the most important moments of his life. "I would be honored," Marcus said sincerely. Keisha stepped back with a warm smile as Marcus moved closer to his son. "I don't really know how to dance either," Marcus admitted. "Maybe you can teach me what Keisha showed you." David beamed with pride at being asked to teach his successful father something new. "Okay, Dad. First, you have to feel the music." Marcus closed his eyes and really listened to the piano for the first time that evening. The melody was gentle and sweet, reminding him of Sarah and happier times when their family had been whole. "Now move your arms like the music makes you feel," David instructed, demonstrating the graceful movements Keisha had shown him. Marcus felt awkward at first, self-conscious about dancing in front of the restaurant full of people who knew him as the serious businessman. But watching David's encouraging smile, Marcus let go of his inhibitions and focused on sharing this moment with his son. They swayed together to the music, father and son, each moving in their own way, but connected by the same rhythm. David in his chair with his beautiful arm movements, and Marcus standing beside him, learning to express emotion through dance for the first time in his life. The restaurant had grown quiet again, but this time it was different. People weren't watching out of curiosity or pity. They were witnessing something pure and beautiful. A father and son connecting through music and movement, showing everyone that love finds a way to express itself regardless of limitations. As the song came to an end, the entire restaurant erupted in applause again. But this time, Marcus barely heard it. He was too busy looking at his son's radiant face and feeling his own heart break open with love and regret and determination. "Thank you," Marcus said to David, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for teaching me how to dance." "Thank you for dancing with me, Dad," David replied, tears of happiness in his eyes. "This is the best birthday ever." Marcus turned to Keisha, who was watching them with tears in her own eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. "You gave us something I didn't even know we needed." "You already had it," Keisha replied softly. "You just needed to see it." As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Marcus realized that everything had changed. He wasn't the same man who had walked in that evening, distracted and disconnected from his son. The simple act of watching a kind waitress treat David with respect and possibility had opened Marcus's eyes to who his son really was. David wasn't a limitation or a source of embarrassment. He was a remarkable child with talents and dreams and so much love to give. Marcus had been so focused on what David couldn't do that he had missed all the amazing things David could do. Walking out into the night air, David chattering excitedly about dancing and music and all the things he wanted to learn, Marcus made a silent promise. He would never again let his own fears and prejudices prevent his son from reaching for his dreams. The billionaire who had entered the restaurant that evening had been successful but empty. The father who left was wealthy in ways that had nothing to do with money. He had discovered the most valuable thing in his life had been right beside him all along, waiting for him to notice. From that night forward, Marcus's priorities shifted completely. He restructured his business empire to allow more time with David. He found piano teachers who specialized in working with disabled students. He researched adaptive equipment that would let David perform more comfortably. Most importantly, he learned to see his son not as someone who needed to be protected from the world, but as someone who had unique gifts to offer it. David began performing at charity events and local concerts, inspiring other children with disabilities to pursue their own dreams. And sometimes, when David performed, Marcus would think of Keisha, the young waitress who had changed both their lives with her simple belief that everyone deserves to dance, each in their own beautiful way. The dance that began that night never really ended. It just expanded to include all the ways a father and son could move through life together, supporting each other's dreams and celebrating each other's unique gifts.